Good morning, everyone. It's good to be among new friends and old friends. And over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to share with you a few concepts and objectives of building strong leadership teams. I have my prop here. I will talk to you a little bit about a turtle on a post and use that as a metaphor in terms of strong leadership teams and components thereof. So that's the topic, focusing on building strong leadership teams. We're going to talk a little bit about other aspects of business and business development over the course of time here. Resultants for business, the logo represents change, the triangle, the delta of change. Today we're going to talk a little bit about some things that you might consider in your organizations that could be components of change for consideration. The straight line arrow that runs up through the middle is usually that vision of an entrepreneur. They see from point A to point B very clearly. They understand how to get there in their own mind, not necessarily on paper, but they do understand that there is an objective and an opportunity. The reality is the curvy road that we all end up taking together as leadership teams and members of organizations. So just so that we have an understanding of this diverse group, how many of you in here view yourself as a leader? Okay, and how many view yourself as a manager? Okay, and how many of you came for free breakfast and golf? Nicely done, nicely done. I love honesty. So at any rate, as we move forward, we'll talk a little bit more about these shared concepts. The first one, effective meeting management, we'll get into in some detail. Cascading messages, basic communication within the ranks. LMA, which is an acronym concept that I'll blend through all of my remarks today. And moving from an org chart to an accountability chart. That's a very basic premise of our organization that nurtures accountability. In the objectives, we'll have some fun. We're going to do some interaction. I'm going to ask you to pull out your notebooks out of the folder here in a minute because I'm going to ask some questions and I'm going to ask you to kind of grade yourself and grade your organization on a number of things. The second is gaining an understanding of LMA as a leadership development tool, and I'm going to share with you three other tools that we believe build strong leadership teams and thereby build strong organizations. The concept of team health is surrounded by the 3 C's in our belief of communication, culture, and consistency. In communication, which is the environment that I'm going to focus on today, we're going to be really talking about a number of concepts that support that communication within the ranks of any organization. And it doesn't matter what the organization is, for-profit, not-for-profit, whenever people gather, there's an opportunity for clarity in communication and cascading messages that fall down through that. All of this promoting team health. And team health is what our organization, Resultants for Business, is all about. We work with organizations throughout the Twin City Metro in this environment on a daily basis. Now today we're going to focus on communication, and the pieces that I have just outlined will be in support of communication as the overall theme. Now, effective meeting management, that is a component that I'm going to dig into in a moment that talks about clarity through the methodology in which you meet. Of course, cascading messages that come out of those meeting environments, the manage and hold accountable concept that falls through leadership teams as a basic component, and finally the accountability chart. Let's start with meeting management. In the environment of meeting management, we're looking at the aspects of how you manage your meeting environment and in your place of business or in your organization. So now get the pen out. Now get the pen out. First question, and answer carefully, please. In the area of meetings, do you have consistent meetings in your organization? Do you believe you have consistent meetings in your organization? And if so, now I'd like you to scale those. On a scale of 1 to 10, how effective are the meetings in your organization? Now, for those of you that drove together, this may cause some opportunity for conversation on the way home today. Because when you think about how you meet, that is a very fundamental component of organizational health. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how effective is your meeting environment? Number 2, how effective is your process? Do you have set times? Do you start on time, end on time? Do you have a set agenda? Are all of those elements in place for your organization? Again, on a scale of 1 to 10, how effective is your organization's meeting process? And so the last component in a meeting process has to do with the leadership of it. Is this an individual leadership that manages and calls the meetings on a regular basis, or is it kind of willy-nilly, catch them in the hall? Again, 1 to 10, how do we meet? Now, in conducting effective meetings, I'm going to take you through a couple of slides that we believe in. On a weekly basis, our team of business advisors has the opportunity to facilitate the leadership meetings on a weekly basis of 24 companies. Now, in doing so, we're leading them through a specific agenda, but as an external third party, we're able to add a dimension to that meeting that may not necessarily be disciplined into the organization. So the first component is reviewing schedules. Effective meetings have a review of schedules so that everyone knows what page they're on for the coming week, weeks, and month. So when you think about some of the disruption in organizations, it has to do with not knowing where your peers are, your peers in leadership particularly. And so as we review calendars and ask you to consider reviewing calendars, although even with technology today and the shared calendar, doesn't mean that everyone's going to be there for that preferred client, vendor, or interaction with fellow employees. The second component, objective, is collecting information. And in the information gathering component, the entire crux of the meeting is to share information that's relevant to the growth of the organization. It's people. It's about scorecard and activity-based reporting. It's about all of the elements of collected information that need to be shared, vendors, suppliers, and so on. The last component is discussing issues. Now, does anyone in here have meetings where the issue is raised and for the next 3 hours we go into the tornado of conversation on that issue that never gets resolved? I know I'm making this up, but I can tell by the body language that it's more the case than the exception in the room. And so what happens with issues is that they get kicked down the road. They're kicking the can. So we meet, we talk about an issue, and then we talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, and nothing gets resolved. Well, not in my world. So I'll share with you in a moment a little bit more on that component of issue solving and to make decisions on how issues come into play. We call this a level 10 meeting. We're involved with the entrepreneurial operating system as a blanket overview of process. A key component for us, we believe, is the level 10 meeting. Now, why level 10? Because, again, we're rating the meeting at the end. How did we do as a team from a scale of 1 to 10? And so as a team, did we start on time, end on time? Did we move through the agenda in a timely fashion? Did we identify what's working and what's not working? And did we come to a conclusion at the end on certain number of issues that we had time for to master? Now, in the first part, the segue, we get involved in the segue component simply for the interaction of the group. So as a leadership team, we're referring to that as personal bests and business bests. We just share a little bit about what happened over the weekend and how that interplays interpersonally with your fellow leadership members. The second piece is the scorecard. Now, this is windshield scorecard. This is activity-based, not hindsight controller stuff. We don't need to know what happened 30 days ago. That isn't going to affect what's going to happen to us in the next 10 to 15 days. We're focused on activity-based, looking forward into the windshield. And so that scorecard is going to represent 2, 3, 4 numbers that each of the leadership team members own. So in sales, number of cold calls made in a day, or however that sales organization measures its productivity. Marketing, how many hits on the website. Finance, where are we at with accounts receivable, cash flow, and burn rate. In production and operations, depending on the type of the organization, where are we at with inventory counts? Where are we at with throughput? What's our percentage of efficiency? All of these become scorecardable activity-based elements. And it doesn't matter what organization you're in, you still have activity-based scorecarding. On track, off track, and that creates issue hunting. The entire purpose of a 90 to 120 minute level 10 meeting is to issue hunt. We're constantly writing issues up on the wall. We're bringing in the whiteboards and laying it out. And all those issues are collected. Not discussed, just collected. There is a time and a place for issue discussion. Now, rock review, objectives. Rocks by Stephen Covey. We're involved in the metaphor of rocks, pebbles, sand, and the cylinder, the glass cylinder. When we're looking at rocks, we're looking at 90-day objectives. Sometimes a rock can be a phase of multiple quarters of effort on a single topic. But more often than not, the rocks are a 90-day objective. Now, when we get into the next segment of customer, employee, and vendor headlines, this can be positive or negative depending on the relationship that is being experienced. Some of the negative elements become issues. Some of the positive things become cascading messages that are ultimately celebrated throughout the organization. Now, the to-do list, otherwise known as an action list, 7, 14, or 21 days. If that action is longer than 7, 14, or 21 days, then it's considered a rock or an objective goal for the coming quarter, and it's moved on to another place. We're not going to bog down a leadership team by taking on too many rocks, too many issues at one time. Momentum is more important than perfection in any organization. And so when you think in those terms, how do you gain momentum? This is a piece of that, is keeping clarity in your leadership team so you're focused on the most important thing at that point in time. The next component is the to-do list, which is the ongoing actions, 7, 14, and 21 days. And all we're asking is, are you on track or off track to getting that action completed? IDS is where the real meat is. And as you can see, 45 minutes or longer, depending how efficient we are inside of this meeting. In the IDS phase, that's where we're taking all of the issues collected over time. And these are issues that came forward from the last meeting and the issues that we uncovered or discovered today. In that IDS period, we will first prioritize the issues, all of them. Prioritize them, which is the most important, the second most important, and the third. And that's it. We're only going to prioritize 3 because we may not have time to get to any more, but we need to know which ones are the most important. Now, when we get to the number 1, identify. We're going to identify the root cause of that issue, and we're going to continue to discuss the D until we get to the root cause. And we want everyone on the leadership team to participate because that brings consensus. And there is no finger pointing coming out of leadership teams. Well, that was that person's idea or that person's. We want consensus, and so a big part of that is equal sharing. So how did I feel when I came out of that issue discussion? Did I have a share in the conversation. And the last is S for solve. So we offer up a solution statement. Generally, that results in an action that goes on the to-do list, and someone owns it. One person owns it, others can help, but only one person owns an action. And so through this process, we build momentum in leadership teams and ultimately build growth within those organizations that are served. Now, the closing is fairly quick. It's a recap of the actions that were just harvested from the issue discussions and the elements of conversation through this meeting. The cascading message, which is a huge component, is a result of celebratory elements that were identified in conversation and other aspects with vendors, team members, and customers that need to be cascaded out. More often than not, we lose track of the praise opportunity. We're always focused on the concerns. And so when the owners and leadership team roll out into the office, what are they focused on? Well, we just had a meeting and this is going bad and this is going bad, and we're constantly moving the negative. But for the organizations that are truly cascading messaging on both sides, they're able to celebrate as well as isolate issues that need to be solved ultimately in their organization. Now, at the very end of each meeting, we rate it 1 to 10, as I commented earlier, and that's a key component of how to run an effective meeting in terms of generating enthusiasm within leadership, consensus, clarity of messaging, and growth in an organization through a consistency of delivery. Now let's look at LMA. And you're going to see LMA come up a number of times as I get closer to the accountability chart discussion this morning and presentation. Leadership is working on the business. These are the individuals who have the vision for the organization, more often than not the entrepreneur, the executive director, and nonprofit. They have the vision for where the organization can go. Now in nonprofits, of course, boards are involved, strategic planning, and so on. But across the board, that vision needs to be led, and working on the business is where that comes into play. Management is working in the business. They're deploying the clarity of expectation that comes from the leadership. Leadership provides clear direction, again going back to the vision. Management brings clarity and definition to expectations. And so as management is bringing this clarity down through the ranks, good results occur, because now you've got cascading messaging and clarity of objective. Leadership creates the opening. Now, the opening is the opportunity of growth, the opportunity of new customers, the opportunity of the big relationships. The owners in an organization are those with the large relationships. When you think about companies and organizations, the leadership generally and the ownership has those big ideas, those big relationships. They deal with the bank, the big customers, the big ideas. That's how they got where they are. Probably deeply in debt, but the opportunity to say they own their own company. So at any rate, creating the opening. The responsibility of management is in the communication of expectations, the communication of forward thinking, and the vision, and how to bring that vision down into rank and file so that there is a very objective outcome. The last piece is leadership is involved in the visioning, the proactive thinking that goes on that sets the course for every organization. And so what separates more often than not leadership from management is in this very component, because management ultimately is involved in the doing. They're bringing that execution message down into the ranks to ensure that it's clear and that everyone is on the same page. Secondly, creating a compelling vision. If there isn't a written down vision in your organization, that leaves way too many loopholes for distrust, confusion, lack of definition, and of course that great big gray cloud on where are we really going. But when there is a compelling vision that is written down, that organization is on a straight and narrow track towards success. And through that, the shifts by the leadership team in adjusting vision to the times, it maintains that headway. And the last is clarity and understanding of goals. As long as we've got clear understanding of goals, we're definitely on the same page. But more often than not, when we get engaged with organizations where the leadership team has not shared goals, does not have a clear sense of vision, that's where the opportunity lies, is pulling all of those components together. The next component of leadership is in providing the necessary tools. So ask yourself and think about, who are your direct reports? How many direct reports do you have? So think about that and write that down on a sheet of paper. How many direct reports do you have as an individual? Anyone here have more than 5 direct reports? Just 5. You hit the right level. 5 or less, that's what is the most effective, or at least believed to be most effective. It's not a real flat organization. It's one that has components where one can elevate and delegate. So we'll talk about that as well. So providing resources. How do I provide resources to my direct reports? Am I optimum in giving them the best possible opportunity? Yes or no? So start to think about this, because at the end of this, I'm going to challenge you as to what was your personal takeaway from this discussion or this presentation that you can implement to create a change in your organization. The next piece is training. Training seems to have a great opportunity among the organizations that we work with. Training is one of those areas that starts when that employee is oriented to their new position and works on throughout. And when I talk about accountability chart, I'll blend training back in at that point as well. Technology. How is your organization delivering technology to your team? Do you have the optimum environment to maintain competitive edge in your marketplace for technology? Because right now, if you think about the most successful organizations, they are leading with technology in every form. That's where we get leverage and efficiency. And for those organizations that have technology as a core component of their leadership team and their organizational vision, those are the companies that are definitely leveraging the future. People. People. How many people in our organization are turtles on posts? Anyone want to venture a guess what that metaphor is about?
The president.
There you go. For some, that would absolutely be true. But a turtle.
The president of the United States.
Oh, that one.
Not me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Phil.
I hate that.
Now that you've brought up the president, Mark, can you come back up, please, and speak to that? That's way above my pay grade. So people, turtle on post is a metaphor for individuals in your organization that got put in a position that they didn't want, they're ill-suited for, they're not trained for, but they got there because somebody placed them there. Think about your organization. Do you have any turtles on posts? Because as we get into strong leadership teams, if you have individuals on your leadership team that got placed there as a turtle on a post, the only one that can take them off there is the one that put them on there. That often becomes your responsibility as a leader and a manager. So think about turtles on posts in your organization and what you might have the opportunity to do to correct. And then the last as leaders and managers is time and your attention. What attention are you giving to those that you serve who are your direct reports? Because that time that you provide is the quality time of growth. It's the clarity of vision, it's the insight of the relationship. And being in a relationship with those that you lead is extraordinarily important because that's what builds trust. And trust is a whole other presentation. But the whole idea of trust in leadership is a component that is extremely important. Now, am I letting go of the vine? Delegation versus abdication. Now, I'm sure everyone in here is a delegator. Every time you provide input to one of your associates, you provide the framework and the guidance so that each of those individuals knows exactly what you expect, when you expect it, and they will know exactly when they've been successful because you are an excellent delegator. Or maybe not. Maybe you wander through the office or the facility firing out orders as an abdicator. Don't give any scope to what you expect, but you know what you want. The person receiving it has no idea what you expect, but now they know what you want. They just don't have a definition of whether they're going to be successful by delivering to it. They don't know when you want it, but they know you want it yesterday. And so delegation versus abdication is a very strong undercurrent that can pull organizations apart. Letting go of the vine is really the metaphor for elevating and delegating. Elevate and delegate. If you can't delegate down into individuals in your organization that share your values, have your sense of purpose and direction, and understand where you're headed, then you are basically in a job. You're not in a career, you're definitely not in a vocation, you're in a job. Because if you can't delegate and you cannot elevate, then the only way to grow an organization is to replace yourself. And if you can't replace yourself, you are stuck in a job. And that goes at every level of an organization. So growing organizations are constantly letting go of the vine. They're not micromanaging. They're figuring out how to delegate through parameters of expectation. They have measurement, which results in accountability, and that ultimately is good leadership. And then the other piece kind of ties right in. Am I willing to get out of the way? Will I get out of the way as a leader? Because that's leadership, getting out of the way. Setting parameters so that you can get out of the way and having the trust that those that you have just delegated to will carry out the mission. So I act with the greater good in mind. Am I acting individual? And you have to ask yourself, am I acting with the interest, the best interest of my organization in mind? And if the answer is yes, you are on solid ground. But when it's about you, and when it's about your department and not the greater organization, that's where we really lose track in terms of the successful lift of an organization. And the last is clarity breaks. Am I taking clarity breaks? That's a wonderful thing. So in clarity breaks, that's just a matter of blow drying the brain, getting the vision down on track. Even management has to take some time to realign and redefine. So the moment you feel like you have to manage someone, you've made a hiring mistake. So think about that. So that is a key component towards your hiring. Think about it. If you've got people around you that you have to manage on a very hard, everyday basis that aren't getting it, understanding it, that's going to cause a lot of consternation in your organization because everyone is watching your management style. All right, management. Keep expectations clear. The clarity in management is what drives the engine. This is in the execution environment. The second, am I communicating well? Is it a two-way street? Is it us versus them, or is it us and them? And think about how you're blending your communication so that everyone in the organization feels like they're a part of a team. Because teamwork is a huge component of business and organizational success, and to the extent that you can convey it is the extent in which you will be experiencing that lift and opportunity. I have the right meeting pulse. We talked enough about the meeting environment. But if your meetings are boring and everyone's laying over, you got a pretty good body language sense that you may not be on the right track. And you might consider some alternatives to getting meetings pepped up, getting them focused, getting in on time, starting on time. I used to keep track on a chalkboard back in the old days, before whiteboards, how many minutes individuals were late for meetings. And then you do an average of what's the cost per employee with benefits and do the math, and that's what it just cost us in delayed start of that meeting. And so when you think about getting your team in tune with promptness, those are some tricks. Doing quarterly one-on-ones, the opportunity to sit down with those that you lead and have a one-on-one. This is a conversation. This is talking about what's working and what's not working. This is even talking about family. It's about having a conversation. It is not a review. Quarterlies can be reviews. There are methods for that, but having conversations are extremely important to advancing the organization. And the last is in the rewarding and recognizing category. The old pat on the back. How do I maintain and keep ahead of my organization? And remembering that a positive is always going to outperform a negative in that regard. And so as you're looking at your organization, what's your style of motivation? Is it the foot? Is it an arm around the shoulder? It's a conversation of support. What's your method and approach to rewarding and recognizing? Now, LMA, lead, manage, and hold accountable. These are the components that are a summary of what I talked about a few minutes ago. When we get into that, providing clear direction and creating an opening of opportunity, that's leadership management, working in, clarifying expectations, and working through all aspects as a whole team for solid execution. The result is accountability. So, how many of you run your operation with an org chart? Nobody has an org chart. We have 1, 2 org charts, 3 org charts. And so all the rest of you are sole proprietorships and you are the only one in your business. So an org chart, for the most part, is a hierarchical directive of execution and accountability. What we have done is moved it to a second level and call it an accountability chart. And I'll dig into the accountability chart as we conclude here. The accountability chart focuses on structure first rather than people. So, how many of you, when you do your organizational chart, you decide that John should go in this box and Judy's in this box, and so therefore, because we have Judy on our team, therefore that box is Judy's box, and so that's what we're going to call it. How many of you start with the roles and then work towards the accountability? So you're starting with roles, and moving towards right people, right seats. And this is a very basic Jim Collins, good to great principle. And as you look at structure in the accountability chart and start to lay it out, you're looking for the 5 major responsibilities that go with each seat on your bus. So in those responsibilities, those are accountabilities and they can be measured. And so those are the primaries, and I'll go into the finance one in just a moment, but they're not tasks. Now, a communication chart, certainly, because it clarifies the positions for everyone on your team. And it also avoids duplication of duties so that we don't end up with multiple people doing the same thing and causing confusion inside of the organization, otherwise known as turf wars. The last component is the reporting structure, because in an accountability chart, there's going to be teams of people associated with each of those accountability segments. And that provides for a very tight accountability component that results with metrics, scoring, and reporting. And all of this defines accountability. So in the big scheme of things, when we're looking at right people, right seats on an organization, we first start with core values, and we're looking to make sure that we have the right people on our team. How many of you have a set of core values in which you vet every hire? Okay, got a few in the room. The importance of that is that the core values drive top down through a leadership team the important components of who you want working side by side with you on a daily basis. And if they don't comport with those core values, you might have a shadow organization going on inside of your organization. And a shadow organization is someone who has their own set of core values and has just taken your company a different direction. Recently, we had a situation where the manager of the freight and warehouse environment had his own shadow organization, and he had a good portion of the company moving in that direction, away from the leader and those who thought they were leading. Core values, right people. The second component is right seat. That gets back to the whole idea of having an accountability chart with functions that each have a scorable accountability. Now, how we do this is by defining the functions and the responsibility of a specific role. Within that, we go GWC. Does the person get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? Now, when you're talking about getting it, does that person understand the role and they want the role? And the last piece of the turtle on the post is certainly the most important. The capacity to do it. Do they have the education, the training, the enthusiasm, and the experience in which to leverage their optimum qualities towards success in that position? So when we go through get it, want it, and capacity to do it, we do a 360 inside of the leadership team. And so with that, we're all pulling things together on a leadership team to where everyone shares that same environment. So we believe the accountability chart is the cornerstone of strategy, and within that cornerstone, the visionary, of course, is the entrepreneur typically, or that individual that sets the vision. The second piece is the integrator, or that individual who is general manager, president, or COO, who is managing the day-to-day, week-to-week of an organization. And inside of this accountability chart, as you see, the very first component of every leadership team member is LMA. Do they have the capacity to lead, manage, and hold accountable? Until you ask yourselves if your leadership team has that component as their first and foremost, that may tell you another component of turtle on a post. Is that person in the right seat on your bus? Or, for that matter, is that person on the right bus? The other two components that you can see with core values and GWC on the left, on the top is a rock or an objective. Every seat on your bus should have at least one objective for the next 90 days. Something that person is focused on that's measurable and will complete, that advances the company or advances their personal department area. And when we've got rocks that are measurable, now we've got momentum. And again, momentum over perfection. That's what moves organizations. So, building strong leadership teams starts with communication. All of these functions, the meeting environment, the cascading messaging, the accountability chart, these are all components of communication in strong leadership teams. And their culture, which we talked about with core values a bit, brings consistency, whether it's through the meeting environment, whether it's through the reporting environment. That consistency is what each organization, for-profit or non-for-profit, should strive for. And that is team health. Thank you.